Hello everybody and welcome to Scanning Your Potato. This is my potato. Alright, this is actually a beginner's guide to how do you just get a first scan out. It's very simple. It's not going to get into too many details. I may talk about stuff that's, more advanced, but just for the beginner who says, I just want to try this out a little bit, I'm going to go over some basic rules. I'm going to go over like a quick dirty scan. It's not even going to be a full object scan. I'm just going to kind of scan one side so you can give it a try, and so like how does your computer deal with this stuff, how good is your camera for this stuff, so that you don't invest a ton of time into scanning, but maybe you want to invest more later. This will kind of give you a little bit of hint whether or not you're set up to do this even. So that's an important step. All right, so let's get going here. So first of all, I got some rules here that I wrote down, so I'll make sure I don't miss anything. And first things first, let's talk about having a camera. Obviously, this camera would work. Here I have an iPhone 13 Pro Max that I just got. It's very nice. This is a Olympus TG6. This is a 12 megapixel camera. This is a 12 megapixel camera. I think one of the lenses might be the third lens or something, might be 16 megapixels or something. But the point is that you don't want to go underneath 5 megapixels. If you have an older phone and it's less than 5 megapixels, you might not be able to get a decent scan, just because the software needs to see a certain amount of detail in order to be able to create the models from your pictures. So that's just something to understand before we get started. So if you have a good cell phone or you have a decent point and shoot camera, you should be fine. Obviously, I have other cameras here in the scene. This is my scan area. I have a ton of cameras, and I actually scan stuff with multiple cameras at one time to speed up the process. That's going to get into more advanced stuff, but for today, we're just going over the simple things. All right, so first of all, the potato, right? Why a potato, or why do I have these blocks here? Okay, I wanted to pick an item that was really simple that everybody could have access to. Potato's kind of boring, right? But it has a lot of good surface detail. It's not reflective, and those are two things that are good for doing your first scan. There is ways to scan things that are more reflective, but it's more advanced and you have to get some special equipment to do it. So for just simple stuff, something like a potato would work. The wood grain that's inside of a block, like a children's block, that would work. I have some rocks over here. I've got this big geode that I've been waiting to crack open one of these days. This thing would work great because it's not really reflective, and it's got tons of detail on it. So I've actually scanned this already, but I haven't actually processed it through the computer. So it's just sitting on my computer waiting for me. That's the kind of things that you would want. Now, let me show you this. This is kind of like something that you wouldn't want. All right, this is just a nice looking Jeep, and it's reflective. It has a lot of flat surfaces with basically little detail, like you can't really see contrast in the paint or anything like that. Like if this had graphics all over the paint and it had a bunch of colorful graphics with lots of detail, it might actually scan okay, but not with the reflections. You have to cancel those out if you're going to do a scan for something like this. Let me show you another example. This is coming in another video. This is a scan, or this is an item that I've scanned, and what I did was I took a paint pen, a few different colors, and I drew a wireframe on it, and then I just put little detailed points all over it. This thing actually scanned pretty well, and then I retopologized it inside the computer. So this is something that actually could work, but as you can see, one, it's actually a little bit less reflective. It's kind of got, it's not a matte surface, but it's kind of a satin surface. I had to put contrast points that the camera could pick up in order for the photogrammetry to work properly. So something like this, if you had, once you get a little bit more advanced, if you want to do something like this, you certainly could. All right, so that brings us to the potato, right? Okay, so we're taking pictures, no camera blur. You don't want any camera blur. Meaning that basically if you have a lot of light in your scene, the camera, especially if you keep it on auto, and I don't necessarily suggest when you get more advanced to keep the camera on auto, but if you have to for your first scan, you can keep it on auto. You want to have a lot of light in the scene so that you can just basically get your shutter speed really, really fast. That means the camera will snap a picture fast, and even if you moved your hand a little bit, it'll probably snap faster than your hand movement. But if you do have blur, like let's say you're taking pictures along, one of these sides and you get some blur, just go ahead and you could delete that picture and just retake it, or just leave it in there, and then later when you look at them on your computer, go ahead and delete them. You don't want anything that has any blur. All right. I'm just going to talk about outdoors really quick because you could do this outdoors. If you wanted to take good photo scans outdoors, what you usually want is you want an overcast day. So it doesn't seem like there's as much light. You might think, well, why not a sunny day? Well, the cast shadows can cause problems, and also the sun actually moves a lot faster than you think. So as you're taking the pictures, the sun can be moving and casting shadows, and those shadows are changing, and that messes up the environment that you want to create for photogrammetry. And that environment is basically a static environment. So if I take pictures of this potato sitting right here, and I go ahead and I do sweeps back and forth and get the whole side here, and nothing moves and everything's static and the light's all static, I'm probably going to get good results. If I'm in a place where I bump the potato and I move it a little bit, or I move the background or something like that, sometimes the photogrammetry software will solve through that if there's only like one or two small changes, but sometimes it does cause problems, or it will always cause problems, but maybe it won't be a drastic problem. So basically, if you're outdoors on a cloudy day, you can go ahead and take pictures all you want, and you will usually get really, really good results. If not, if it's a sunny day, and like let's say you're getting a tree or something like that, I probably wouldn't do trees on a sunny day, but if I want to do, like, let's say a side of a building, I can go to the shadow side of a building and I can take pictures of a wall or take pictures of sidewalk underneath a shadow, So you're just making sure that direct lighting is not hitting it, causing cast shadows. Okay, let's see. You could, in this case, like I'm using a direct light right here, I could diffuse this, like maybe put like a little cloth over this. Be careful if you're going to do that kind of stuff because light bulbs can get hot. However, these are LEDs, so they're not really that hot until you get towards the back. Then it's a little bit warm. Softbox lights are the best, but if we're just doing a simple scan, you can just use a regular lamp. I've got lamps all over the place that I could use for this, but I'm just using this one because it's very convenient because I can kind of move it around and get it right where I want. Okay, so what else? Let's see. Make sure, this is kind of the number one thing when you start to scan. Make sure you have enough overlapping pictures. All right, so I'll explain this really quickly. If I'm holding this up and I take a picture of the center, and then I go ahead and take another picture a little bit up from the center, I want to make sure that this center part is still in the second picture. That would be kind of like a 50% overlap if it was like right on the edge. If I took a second picture and the other one's right, like this, where I took the first picture is right on the edge, that'd be kind of like a 50% overlap. The more overlap that you get as you take these pictures, and so if you take them like in sequence close to each other, the more detail you're going to get out of your scans, and it's usually going to solve better. However, the more pictures you take, it also takes longer to solve, but you get better results. So the important thing is, like I said, you don't want the motion blur, and you have to make sure that you take enough pictures so that you're getting contrast points or like details that are in each frame. So in other words, make sure that as you're going along, you can still see some of the stuff that you'd got in the last frame. And what happens is the photogrammetry software will look at the two separate frames and will be able to see the same detail, and then it can actually start triangulating where that point cloud is in the 3D space. That's basically, I'm not the math person that knows all the algorithms behind it, but that's basically how it works from my understanding. So make sure you get enough overlap. So there's another thing too that goes into taking the pictures, and that is sharpness. So I know I talked about motion blur, and obviously that's going to tie into sharpness, but there's also, you want to try to get the whole object in focus if you can. And so since this is a basic guide, the idea is if you're using a small camera with a small lens, it usually has a very small sensor, and usually you get almost everything in focus. Same thing with the cell phone, because these are both 12 megapixels. You're going to get almost everything in focus, unless you're really, really close to the object. Then you might actually get some basically your focal plane will actually work so that it's not all in focus. But you want to sort of be at a far enough away that you get everything in focus, and but also close enough that you get details. So you might have to take a few shots just to see that you're getting everything in focus and check it. And I'll do that once I start taking pictures here. So that's just an important detail. As much as you can, getting everything in focus. My bigger cameras, that becomes more of an issue because the sensor's larger, and so the focal plane actually gets more shallow. So I have to work with it to make sure I'm getting everything in focus. Let's see, what else we got here? Let's see. If you have a tripod, that's a great way to do this. I'm just going to handhold this. I have enough light here, and I'm basically just going to do a simple sweep over one side. I'm not even going to try to flip it, because, like I said, this is your test run. This is not like, hey, I want to do the perfect model. But yeah, just a sweep over one side, and we'll see how it turns out. You can hold it with your hand just fine, but tripods obviously are always a good thing if you have them. It could slow you down though. If you have enough light, you might not need a tripod. So I have a color chart here. This is a more advanced thing. You probably wouldn't need this. You could just use some white sheets of paper. I would grab at least like 3 so that you're not seeing through them. And you just put that down here. It's a good idea to take basically like a white balance shot before you start, and to check your pictures. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and just start taking some pictures here. Let's do a test. Boom. Oh, look at that. Forgot to turn my RAW on. All right, if you got RAW pictures, take them like that. You'll get better results. Let's go ahead and just snap another one. And then I'm gonna move this color chart out of the way. And like I said, I'm not worried about getting the whole thing right now. So I'm just gonna start kind of on one side, maybe towards the back, and take a picture. Let's test it. Let's see, is it sharp all the way through? It looks good. Everything looks sharp. Move the camera around. It's all the way sharp, all the way in the edge. Lots of detail. So I'm not too close and I'm not too far. So that should be good. Let's go back. All right, so that's one. That'll work. And now I'm just gonna, like that, move it a little bit, that. And I'm just kind of sweeping through, and I'm making sure I have plenty of overlap. All right. Now, I'll just move it like on a little bit different angle and do the same process. It doesn't have to be perfect, just as long as you're getting a bunch of detail in here. The software's pretty good, it figures it out. Now my hand was moving there a little bit, so I don't know if I got that one good enough, if it's gonna be blurry, but I'll just not worry about that. All right, and let's do this side. Now I'm casting a little bit of a shadow on here, which isn't great, so I'm going to pull back a little bit and try to just move my... See, I'm really casting a shadow. It's hard, I'm sure you can't see it from your angle, but I can see it on my phone. So I can also, if I want to, I can turn it this way as well. The software will figure it out, usually. Let me just go like this. Maybe go like that. Like so. Like so. And let's see if I can get all the way over here with one arm. A little bit of a shadow shouldn't kill anything, as long as it's not too much. Okay, so all right, so let's look at what we got here. We can just kind of scroll through here You can see they look different sometimes, but the software will probably be able to figure it out, no problem. Especially if you post-process them like I'm going to. You don't have to. Oh, look at that. Low battery. Hey everybody, we've got all of our potatoes loaded into the PC, and now we're going to boil them, mash them, and stick them in a stew. Not really.
What's a potato, precious?
Okay, you didn't expect that one coming. I apologize if it freaked you out. But let's get going. I'm going to select all these DNGs. I got Photoshop open. If you worked with JPEGs, you don't really even need to do this step. You can try to just skip this step. But since I have these DNGs, I'm going to pull them into Photoshop. And they'll open up in Camera Raw and give it a second because it's I have 45 of them. So we got to go ahead and process this. I'm going to go ahead and expand this for a second here. I'm going to use the first picture, and I'm going to go ahead and make some changes to it. First thing is the white balance. Since I have this white checker chart here, I can just go ahead and click on this, and then I'm going to select this gray one right there and say, okay, that looks good. Okay, and I can turn that off. I'm going to go ahead and do what I generally do at first, which is I'll drop the highlights maybe down to like 50-ish. I'll raise the shadows up to about 50-ish. And you might be wondering why I'm doing this. It is because generally when we're doing a scan, we're not actually looking for like shadow and highlight information. We're actually looking for like a flat, diffuse type of look, so that we can use that as a texture, like a true texture in the color map. And then like if you're using a game engine or you're using it to render in an animation, you would want the lighting within that game engine or that animation, or like Maya or whatever, you would want that lighting to actually affect the surface, not be the lighting from the scan. So we want to cancel that. We could also, so another thing we can do is let's take the whites down to like, I don't know, 25. Take the blacks up to 25, and then this is going to start to cancel stuff out. But it also kind of gets rid of some contrast too. So you could see that doesn't look super good, but we could go into like details if you want. You don't have to do this, but let's see here. That's not the one I wanted. Not that detail. Let's see here. Oh, it's right here. I missed it. Okay, so I can bump the texture up like a little bit, maybe bump the clarity a little bit. This will kind of give it a little bit of contrast. So it's kind of bringing some micro contrast back in, and I can just bump the contrast just a little bit. I'm kind of taking out contrast by lowering all these and raising the blacks, but I'm just kind of going to drive a little bit back in and see how that works. Okay, so that looks pretty good. This looks a little mushy when I get close. So, it's not going to be as good of a result from this as it would be from like a high quality camera with like a really good lens. But now that we've got this, all we have to do is select the rest of these. So I'm just going to hold Shift and click on the N one and then right click, and I can say sync settings. And it's going to come up with a list. I don't need any of these. I don't really need this geometry, just the basic stuff. I'm gonna hit OK. And you'll see it'll change the white balance for all of these. And bada bing, bada boom. Looks like we're pretty good. So now what I can do is I can just come up to this little button here. They're already selected, so I can just tell this to export them. And I'll go ahead and select a folder. And I actually went through this once just to make sure everything was going to work the way I expected. So I already have a process folder. So I'm going to go ahead and just say processed 2 _2. So we'll go like that. I'll put it in there, select it, and I want to make sure that my JPEG quality is the highest. Technically, the program I'm going to use, you can put DNGs right into it, but I prefer just to keep JPEGs. And a lot of times, after I'm done with these, I might actually get rid of the DNGs just to save on file size. And also, I can load JPEGs up to like Amazon Photos, or I also have Flickr, and I could just save them there so that they're not on my hard drive. But that's up to you whether you want to destroy the DNGs. So I'll just go ahead and say save. And you'll see a little bar pops up here. And Photoshop's actually pretty fast at like processing through this. I have a pretty fast computer though too, so just FYI, like whatever results you're getting, might be a lot slower if your computer's not as fast as mine. I have two 1080 Ti graphics cards, and I have an 18 core i9 processor with 128 gigs of RAM. So it is a rather fast computer, but that some people have faster computers. So okay, I've got that done, and looks like this thing's over everything else. So let me just go ahead and see if I can pull this website over. Okay, so this is the program we're going to be using to do the scan processing. It's called Agasoft Metashape. If you are a student, you can buy a student version, which is a perpetual license, and it is only $59. I think it's a really good deal. And if you're not a student, I'm a teacher, so I actually could get that because it's also educational. But I actually own the version right here, the standard version that I bought myself for $179. On my school computer, I do have a version of this, which costs that. So this has a whole bunch of other stuff that this version doesn't do, but this version actually works really good. So it's not really like this is. It depends on what you're doing. You may not even need all the stuff that's in this one. So that's Agasoft Metashape. You can download a trial version for 30 days if you don't want to pay for it, if you just want to try out this tutorial. So let's go ahead and get into actually using Agasoft. So I'll go ahead and bring it up, and it's right here. We'll just launch it, and it comes up like this. And then let's find those pictures. So here's process 2. Okay, so they're all JPEGs. Great. I'm just going to grab all of these, and I'm going to drag them into this little thing right here that says chunk 1 and let go. And we can minimize that. It's going to bring all the pictures in. You'll see them down here. There's not that many, so hopefully this won't take too long. And I'm going to minimally process these. What if I was going for something that was really, high end, I would go through some more steps, but I just want to get you through the process. So let's go ahead and go through the first step, which is you just go up to workflow and you hit align photos. Now let me explain something here. It's going to ask you, do you want to do it like at highest, high, medium, low, lowest? What this is going to do is it's actually going to take your resolution and cut it in half every time you go under highest. So highest is like your full resolution picture, and then high would be half of it, and then medium would be half of the high. So it really diminishes, and it's only okay to do that if you have really high resolution values or resolution pictures. Then you can go lower than the highest. But since we only have a 12 megapixel, I suggest probably trying it just at highest, because you're going to get your best results from that. There's also, this is set to like key points and tie points, and I don't want to get into like explaining everything, but you can try upping this a little bit, maybe like 80, and then just hit OK, and then it's going to run through and do this point cloud detection and try to start making a little point cloud for you that you can look at, and then there's extra steps after that. So it's not this, sometimes depending on how big of a project you're doing, how many pictures are in there, how high resolution it is, what your computer speed is, the whole entire process could take hours if not days. It depends on how big it is. I did an aerial photograph set of my home and my whole property, and I think it was something like came out to be like 46 million polygons or something like that, and it had, I don't know how, maybe like hundreds and hundreds of pictures, and I think that took like all night to process on my computer. And on a slower computer, it might take even longer. Okay, it's telling me that one of the photos failed to align, or some of the photos. So it looks like. So I'm gonna go ahead and look and see which one. I only didn't get one of them. So 44 out of 45 was good. This one's not. If I want to, I can right click on this and just say remove camera. Yes. So what do my cameras look like? I can go like this. And hit this little camera button here, and you can see these are where I had all my cameras aligned taking pictures, and obviously we only did one side.
But that's all the places that I took pictures. So it's kind of random. It's kind of all over the place. It wasn't, I wouldn't say this is my best photo shoot for this, but I wanted to show what it might look like if you were just kind of trying it out. You've got all these little points here that we're really not going to need eventually. And so I don't want to get into the weeds on like getting rid of all those. But there's a way that you can kind of like minimize this space in which you're building, and then you get better resolution. I guess that wouldn't be too bad of a thing to go here. If you go and click on this and you say resize region, you can go ahead and basically just take this box and make it smaller like so. And you have to go back to this little pointer here, and you can double click on your object, and then you can rotate on this little whatever this widget is, orbit thing, and you can kind of look at like and make sure that your box encompasses the area that you want to build. And so I'll make it a little bit smaller here, and it just is going to be less stuff to process, and it will be a little bit cleaner. And then I'm always going to check this and make sure that my whole thing that I want to build is within that box, because if you cut off a section, then it won't actually build at all. And there's I get a lot more specific if I'm trying to do a really good refined model with a ton of pictures and stuff. But for this one, I'm just going to leave it like this. So just make sure it's the area you want to build is within there, and then you just go to the next workflow object, which is to build a dense cloud. And then there's different levels that you can do here. I think I'm just going to go with high for now, and let it go. And I will pause the video and come back, because obviously you don't need to sit here and watch this thing bake, but it'll probably take about maybe 5 minutes or so with something that only has this many pictures. So it's going to just go ahead and tell me, it's going to give me, some calculations here, but you can't listen to this thing because it'll pop all over the place, and sometimes it takes less time than it said, and sometimes it takes more. So I would bank on it will take more than it actually says. So we'll pause and we'll come back. All right, we're back, and it did take about 4 minutes or so at the most, and nothing seems to be changed yet, but that's because I have to hit this button here, and then this will show me the dense cloud that I'm gonna go ahead and use. And you can see, like, even from this point of view, it actually, like, this looks pretty interesting. Not bad. And what we can do now is go to workflow, and we can build a mesh. There's two different ways you can build a mesh. You can do it with a dense cloud, or you can do it with the depth maps. Well, I should say there's three. You can use the sparse cloud too. It depends on what kind of results you're getting. Usually, I believe I'm usually using the depth maps, but for this one, the last time I built it, I got better results with the dense cloud. But I'll go ahead and say with the depth maps and see what happens this time, because that's what I'm usually doing. And we'll go from there, and we'll see how it turns out. Shouldn't take too long. It says 6 minutes, and then it's popping up to 8 and then back down to 6. So we'll see. All right, it's almost done. Only took maybe about 2-3 minutes, and we're still looking at the cloud. Let's go ahead and look at the actual, this is the shaded mesh that it made, and let's look at it with this is with the vertex colors. So it's not quite a texture yet, and actually that looks pretty good. It's a little lumpy on the inside, but that looks pretty decent. Not bad at all for what we did. I mean, we didn't do a ton of pictures, and we didn't do it all the way around, but actually really our lighting wasn't perfect, because I like to have nice, soft lighting all the way around it, so you don't get you don't get any dark areas down here. But it does look pretty decent. So the next thing we can do is, you want to build a texture, you can, and you say okay. I have it at just 2048, which should be plenty for this. Sometimes if it's really complex or large object, obviously I make it up to 8K. You can do 8K textures with it. What this will do is it'll lay out just generic UVs, and basically project those cameras onto the mesh, and then it'll give you, you know, your actual texture, your diffuse texture from that camera projection. So this can take, just it usually doesn't take that long. It's one of the shorter steps, but depends on how complex the object is. Okay, it's almost done. It already went through the first step of the texture creation, and now it's doing some blending textures, and that should go really, really fast. Typically does. There we go. Okay, doesn't look any different yet because you have to change this to model textured, and now you get the full-blown look of your potato. So obviously this extra stuff out here we would need, and really this is just a trial run just to see how it works. But you can see the results you can get, and it didn't take too long to get to this point. Again, if you want to see how the actual surface looks, this will show it a little bit better if you're just looking at the model and you're not seeing the textures. So yeah, this is it. This is a first step into photogrammetry. If you followed along, thank you for coming on this journey with me, and I hope that you can use this for getting you into doing some fun stuff. Where could you go from here? Well, obviously doing the 360 all the way around. We can also use even just a section of this. You can use as like a stamp for ZBrush, like a depth map that you use for alphas for ZBrush or something like that. So it's really cool to have real organic objects that you can stamp with. Let me just show you some other examples too. I showed you that Ford car. Oops, let's save this before we go any further. Save as. I'm gonna say this over my first one because my first one was didn't turn out as good as this one. This one actually turned out better. I should note that that's one strange thing that happens with these projects. I've had many times where I've done the same project twice with the same photos basically, and for some reason one time it turns out better than the other. I'm not sure why, but you think they'd turn out the same, but they don't necessarily. Let me open up this 39 Ford because I showed you guys that car earlier. This is what the scan looked like. This is just Vertex paint, and if you went ahead and looked at the model solid, this is how the model turned out. It is lumpy, it's got holes in it and stuff like that, so it's not perfect, but it's a nice guide if you're going to build something like this to kind of get the proportions correct. And so eventually it turned into this, and so this is the actual model finished, and I retopologized on top of it and a lot of smoothing, and and then some of the stuff I just built from scratch, but it's nice to have a good reference to go by, and to know if you're kind of hitting that mark of where you want the car to be as far as the shape wise, and then this a little quick render of it. Not a perfect render, but just a nice little render. And so yeah, that's that. Something that's really high fidelity. Let me pull up like a really high fidelity type of object here. So here is like a tree bark scan. This is actually a decimated mesh. This one's 10 million polys. I'll bring up the 10 million poly one. You can see here like the amount of detail. This was, I think, using a Sony A7. No, I'm sorry, Sony A6400. I believe it was either that or it was a Sony RX10 Mark IV. One of the two I used, but either way, they're comparable. But yeah, you can see the amount of detail you can get, and you can use this for alphas, or you can use this for an actual model. Like let's say you're going to model a tree, you could start off with the base that if it's in a game, that's the people are going to see if they walk up to it. You could have this very nicely done and then have it break into more generic texturing when you get up higher, especially if this is like the kind of model that was like in a really important area of the game that you were going to see, or like an important tree. Let's see, model shaded. And so you can see this is just vertex colors. This isn't even textures. So when it's really high density, it's going to look obviously a lot nicer. If I bring up, some of the pictures, you can see how nice and crisp these pictures are. And that's all the data information that it's getting. And so, yeah, that could turn out really good. And you can see there's obviously a lot more pictures in here. So that's why we're able to get so much more information from this. So, yeah, it's cool stuff. A lot of fun. And, the more you get into it, the more you start wondering what else can you scan. So that's the part that I like. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope this got you started in a good path. Take care. Bye now.
Yes. Now that I'm looking at my potato, it looks like Quasimodo.